We often talk about medical goals that are focused on, maintenance or a cure. But today we're diving into something quite a bit more ambitious, biological engineering.
Hmm.
We're looking at the specialized world of periodontal regeneration. You might know it as advanced bone grafting in dentistry, where the entire goal is to make the human body truly regrow the complex structures it's lost.
That's exactly right. And what we're synthesizing today is from some really high-level dental research and academic material. It's all focused on the specialized science needed to, well, to overcome the damage from chronic periodontal disease.
Right.
So this isn't just about treating an infection, not at all. It's about rebuilding the periodontium, that whole microscopic system of bone, ligament, and cementum, the tooth's foundation.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really get what periodontal therapy is fundamentally trying to do, why true regeneration, I mean, not just patching a hole, is so incredibly challenging, and crucially, the technical mechanisms, the modes of action that these specialized materials use to basically tell your body how to rebuild itself.
Well, to set the baseline, you have to look at the goals of the initial therapy first. It's all about controlling the bacterial infection, maximizing the recruitment of healthy tissues, and making sure that root surface is clean.
Okay.
But there's one goal we use some specialized language for, which is stopping the apical migration of the epithelial attachment.
Okay, let's stop right there and unpack that jargon immediately. For anyone listening, when you say apical migration of the epithelial attachment, what are we actually talking about? Is it just the gum line pulling away from the tooth?
That's exactly what it looks like in the mouth. The epithelial cells, the ones that make up your gums, they start migrating down the root.
Yeah.
Toward the apex.
Away from the crown.
Away from the crown, yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of staying attached up high. And that movement is what deepens the pocket and exposes more and more of the root. If we can't stop that, the disease just keeps progressing.
And even after all that initial non-surgical work, the deep cleaning, the infection control, the sources, all point to this really severe lingering risk, the residual PD pock-up.
This is the definition of unfinished business in dentistry. It's a periodontal pocket that stays deep even after you've completed the initial therapy.
It sounds minor.
It might seem that way, but the research is very clear. Deep residual probing depths, we're talking sites that measure 6 millimeters or more, are major risk indicators for the disease coming back later.
And this is where the stakes get really high, right? Because if those deep pockets are also connected to existing intrabony defects, or what the sources call severe furcation involvements, the risk for just losing the tooth skyrockets.
That's a critical point. An intrabony defect means the bone loss has created a real, identifiable hole around the root, often with 3 bony walls.
Okay.
A furcation involvement is, frankly, even worse. It means the bone is eroded so badly that the space where the roots of a tooth branch apart, the furcation, is now exposed.
So if I'm picturing a molar, it's like a little tripod of roots.
A perfect analogy. Imagine that tripod. That the furcation is that central point where the legs meet. If you lose bone there, you're compromising the entire foundation of the tooth.
It sounds like the moment that tripod loses its stability, the tooth's fate is sealed unless you do something pretty aggressive.
Precisely. So the most important clinical objective at that point becomes the reduction, or ideally complete eradication, of those deep residual pockets and eliminating those awful furcation defects.
And that brings us to the biggest biological distinction we need to make today. The difference between just healing and achieving true regeneration.
Yes.
So let's draw a really sharp line between these two terms that get confused all the time in medicine. Regeneration versus repair. In the jaw, what's the actual difference?
Repair is the simpler and honestly the less desirable process. It's when you restore continuity to the wound, but you do it without regenerating the original complex tissues.
So without the form and function.
Exactly. A classic repair outcome is the formation of a long junctional epithelial attachment. It basically covers the defect, but it provides almost no structural support. It's a patch. It's not a rebuild.
Okay, so if repair is the patch, then regeneration is the complete structural replacement. The sources say this means recreating the entire periodontium. So you need new cementum, a new periodontal ligament, and new bone.
That is the absolute key takeaway. For you listening, this isn't just about growing new bone. That's only one part of it. This is about recreating the entire microscopic system of ropes and anchors.
Ropes and anchors.
Think about it. The bone socket, the cementum lining the root, and then the ligament fibers, the little ropes called Sharpie's fibers, that have to connect the two perfectly.
And to prove you've achieved that perfect success, you have to see something called new attachment.
Correct. New attachment is the histological gold standard. It proves you have a new functional connection of tissue to a root surface that was previously exposed by disease. You have to be able to see new cementum, inserted ligament fibers, and new supporting bone.
And you have to be careful not to confuse that with reattachment.
Right, reattachment is just reconnecting to bits of vital tissue that were still left on the root. You're not creating anything new.
And what about bone fill? That just sounds like an outcome.
It is purely an outcome. Bone fill just refers to the volume of new bone you see in a defect.
Right.
And look, it's great to see, but it's descriptive. It doesn't prove that you also regenerated the crucial ligament and cementum. That's the ultimate goal.
It is just astonishing that we can even attempt this. So here's where it gets really interesting for me. Why is achieving this true, perfect regeneration bone, ligament, cementum, all in the right place so incredibly challenging? The biology just seems to fight you every step of the way.
It is fundamentally difficult. You're fighting 4 major biological constraints at the same time. The first is what we call fast growth.
Okay.
We need the slow-growing cells, like the osteoblasts that form bone, to move into that space. But the fast-growing epithelial cells, which are designed for rapid wound coverage, they just race them to the site.
So you're basically in a cellular land rush.
A highly unbalanced one, yes. Epithelial cells can heal a cut in days. Bone takes months. If those epithelial cells get there first, they create that non-supportive patch we talked about, the long junctional epithelium, and true regeneration is completely blocked.
Just shut down before it even starts. What are the other 3 constraints?
Second is limited space. These periodontal defects are often like narrow, deep tunnels. They're hard to access, they're hard to keep clean, and it's very difficult to stabilize any material inside them. Third, there's the avascular root issue. Unlike bone or gum tissue, the root surface has no blood supply of its own. None. That makes delivering nutrients to new regenerating cells extremely difficult.
And the 4th challenge brings us right back to that multitasking problem.
Exactly. The final constraint is the need to regenerate 3 tissues perfectly. We're not just asking for cartilage or skin. We need cementum, PDL, and bone to all form and integrate in the correct order and the correct spatial arrangement. It's an incredibly demanding synchronization task for the body.
So to overcome these biological speed bumps and space limitations, science has to rely on specialized biomaterials, grafts, fillers, scaffolds, membranes. But we need to be really clear on the difference between the 2 main categories of material you can put in the defect.
We classify them based on what they contain. So bone grafts are defined as tissues that can promote healing and are transplanted into a defect. The key detail is that they may contain viable cells. They're alive.
Okay, living tissue. And then you have bone substitutes.
Right. These are natural or synthetic materials. They promote healing, but, and this is the key, they contain only mineralized bone matrix with NO viable cells. They are inert scaffolds.
Hold on. If the ultimate goal, which I know we'll get to, is for the patient's own body to completely replace whatever material you put in there, why bother with viable cells at all? Wouldn't an inert scaffolding a substitute be way safer and simpler to make and handle?
That's a fantastic question. And it gets to the heart of the debate. While substitutes are, often easier to sterilize and have an unlimited supply, those viable cells, when they work, they offer immediate osteogenic potential. They start building bone right away.
So they bypass the waiting period?
Exactly. They bypass the lag time you need for the host's own cells to migrate into an inert substitute. But as you suggested, the risk of rejection or failure is higher because it's living tissue. And this difference in what they're made of dictates exactly how they work. Which brings us to the 3 crucial modes of action.
This is the central idea for today's deep dive, how these materials actually signal new bone growth. Let's break down the 3 mechanisms.
Okay, first we have osteoconductive materials. The way to think about this is the scaffold.
The scaffold.
The material is passive. It's just a template, a physical structure. Host cells from the adjacent bone move into it and lay down new bone on top of the material surface. It gives you the architecture, but it doesn't give you any instructions. Calcium phosphate is a classic example.
So the body just uses it like a bridge to cross a gap. Okay, so what about the materials that actively provide the instruction manual?
That's osteoinductive. This is the signal. These grafts actively induce bone formation because they contain powerful bone-inductive substances growth factors.
Okay.
And these growth factors, they stimulate the local, undifferentiated mesenchymal stem cells to turn into osteoblasts, which are the cells that actually form new bone.
And what's the prime example of an inductive material?
The classic example is DFDBA, that's demineralized freeze-dried bone allograft.
DFDBA, that sounds incredibly technical. What is that really?
It is essentially human donor bone that's been processed.
Hmm?
We use a weak acid to remove the mineral part, and that process exposes all the necessary growth factors, the bone morphogenetic proteins, or BMPs.
Ah, the BMP.
Those are the chemical instructions. They're what tells the host stem cells, hey, you, start becoming bone now.
So conduction is the structure, induction is the biochemical signal. What's the third most biologically active mode?
The third is osteogenic, and you should think of this as the seed. This type of graft forms new bone directly because it actually contains viable, living, bone-forming cells that are already working.
And the only material that can actually do that is bone taken from the patient themselves, correct?
That's right. The autogenous bone, graft-taking bone from a non-essential spot on the patient, like their chin or their hip, is the only naturally osteogenic material there is. It's the ultimate seed because the cells are alive, they're fully functional, and they are 100% compatible.
So you're telling me that the single best option, the best seed we have, is still literally carving a piece of bone out of a patient's hip or chin and moving it immediately into their jaw. That just reinforces how hard it is to replicate this synthetically.
Absolutely. Autogenous grafts are the gold standard. They provide all three things. A scaffold, they're osteoconductive. Signals, they're osteoinductive because all bone has growth factors. And seeds, they're osteogenic.
But the supply is limited, and you need a second surgery site.
Big drawbacks.
So given all that complexity, what's on the wish list for an ideal bone grafting material? The sources lay out like 9 incredibly demanding criteria.
It truly is a wish list. I mean, the ideal material has to have an unlimited supply, which immediately rules out that autogenous graft we just called the gold standard.
Right.
It has to be easily manipulated to fit the defect perfectly.
Yeah.
It must elicit absolutely no adverse host responses, no immune rejection. And critically, it has to facilitate rapid revascularization. It needs to get a blood supply fast to help with healing and fight off infection.
And to connect it back to our modes of action, the ideal synthetic would have to somehow combine all three: osteoconduction, osteoinduction, and osteogenesis, which is why they struggle so much to compete with the patient's own tissue.
And that combination still has to satisfy the long-term biological requirements, which are even more demanding. The material can't just sit there forever as a foreign object. It has to be completely replaced by the host's own native bone. And that bone has to be of superior quality and quantity, and the replacement has to happen fast.
That total replacement process, it sounds like a biological takeover.
It is. It's called creep substitution. The material acts as the perfect template for the new tissue, but at the same time, it's being resorbed and replaced by the host's bone. If that substitution isn't complete, the final result is inferior.
So the material has to be there long enough to guide the entire rebuild, but then it has to be dissolved and gone by the time the rebuild is complete.
Exactly. And the final requirement, the ultimate measure of true periodontal regeneration, is that it must also induce cementogenesis and the formation of a complete new attachment apparatus. If all you get is bone fill, you've achieved a repair. If you get new bone, new cementum, and a new periodontal ligament, that is true functional regeneration.
Wow. We started with the clinical goal of just getting rid of some deep, lingering pockets, and we've ended up in the world of biological high engineering. It's this delicate balance of supplying the perfect architecture with a scaffold, injecting the right biochemical signals for induction, and then somehow winning a high-speed cellular race against the body's own healing tissues.
Indeed. And the entire field really hinges on that paradoxical requirement we just discussed. Creep substitution. This idea that a foreign material, even the most sophisticated one we can invent, must be fully and precisely replaced by the patient's own superior bone structure.
Right.
When you really stop and consider that demand, that the material has to serve as a perfect template but then completely disappear, what does that suggest to you about the sheer complexity and really the self-correcting power that's inherent in the human skeletal and connective tissue system? That, I think, is the ultimate thought experiment here.